Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. The F1 schedule is heating up. Will you go with the reliable and Max Verstappen, or take your chance with a potential surprise? Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code you see at the bottom of your screen somewhere, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Welcome to Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write reviews. It really helps us grow the show. If you want more from me, you can get me on social media at Tim Hauraney. When he's not out designing landscapes, is that right, Dailey? I got a good setup here. It's incoming.
That would be like landscaping. I work in the civil engineering field, so sort of close, but not quite.
When he's not out civil engineering or crushing podcasts, you can catch him on Sky Sports UK. It's Mr. Mark Dailey all the way over from Scuderia F1 Pod. What's up, man? Thanks very much for doing this. Tell me what's going on with the Sky Sports UK thing.
Oh, yeah, so tomorrow morning I'll be doing a quick hit with them at about 3:30 GMT, which will be, 10:30 Eastern Time, 7:30 Pacific Time. So if you got access to Sky Sports UK via legitimate reasons, check it out. Not quite so legit reasons, that you didn't hear that from me. But, check it out if you can. It should be good, man.
Good stuff, buddy. Thanks very much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Let's jump into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. We'll start with let's just start with the sprint race that we saw on Saturday. Sprint shootout that happened at 4 a.m. Eastern, which would have been 1 a.m. Pacific for yourself. Were you up for that? I mean, I was. Oh, doggy.
I tried to, but the last 2 weeks have been insanely crazy. I actually crashed pretty early on Friday night, so I did get up until watch it till I was having my coffee on Saturday morning. Otherwise, normally on a Friday night, I'm a bit of a night person. I totally would have stayed up and watched it, but this time Mark needed a little bit of beauty rest, I'm afraid.
Mark
I don't know if it helps.
I
don't know if it helps, but
Mark needed his sleep. So Verstappen and Russell, I mean, I think for myself in the sprint race, that was one of the biggest takeaways from it. Obviously, the entire motorsports world saw that. Verstappen calling Russell a D-head as he walked away on live television. So classy stuff.
Tell us what you really think, Max.
Oh, my God. What did you make of that situation? I mean, on my side, look, Max should stop complaining. That's just good. That's just good hard racing. Seriously.
I agree. Totally. I agree. I mean, it was maybe a little kind of a lunge, but I mean, he was pretty much alongside him, and we've learned enough from George Russell that he's not going to back off an inch if he thinks he's got the advantage on the attack and in defending as well. I mean, he's there to race, man, and I didn't think anything was dirty about it. I think it was just a racing incident, and I think Max just has to get used to the fact that just because he's reigning double world champion doesn't mean that anybody's going to cut him some slack. I think because he's reigning world champion and a 2-time world champ in a Red Bull, I think he's got a big target on his back that he's the one that everybody else in the field is trying to catch, right? So extra motivation for George.
Yeah, for sure. I talked about this on the SDPN social media channel on Saturday, where it's like, if we take a look at how this thing actually went down, I mean, both of them as the lights go out coming into turn one, they're literally side by side as they're coming through turn one, and then it's essentially a drag race down to turn two. And I think Max gave George a bit of room, but at the same time, I mean, George is also on the inside, and his right front wheel is pretty close to, I would say, Verstappen's almost his steering angle. So, I mean, at the end of the day, in my opinion, that's Russell's corner.
Yeah.
And then again, you're coming out of two. They have a bit of contact. That's where some damage gets done. And then heading down to three, it's a drag race again. Though Russell outbraking Verstappen and Russell pulling ahead as he's going towards the apex. So again, Russell's corner. And my thing is that it's like the old Ayrton Senna saying, if if you're not going to go for a gap, then you're not a racing driver, right?
Yeah, what are you doing there?
Every single driver on that grid, Mark, would do the same thing. Swap positions, right? Like Max would have done it too. You're telling me that he wouldn't? Of course.
He would have fought just as hard for that one. Like you say, I mean, they were virtually alongside. George had the inside line. It wasn't like the tip of like George's front wing was level with Max's rear tire. I mean, they were virtually side by side. George had the inside line to the corner. One of them could have lifted a little bit, but they didn't. And I think that it was just the results of two guys fighting for every literal millimeter on the track there. George comes out in front, so that sets him up nicely for turn 3. There's a bit of contact there, and obviously Max gets a little bit of damage to the floor. But then again, if you're not there to race, if you're not there to fight for each and every position in each and every corner, what are you doing there? I mean, you should be doing something else. You're not cut out to be a racing driver, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Like, look, I understand, like, Max is fighting for a driver's championship, and look, I like both of these drivers. You know, they're generational talents. You know, but both of them, you know, generational talents. I just think that if this had been, you know, a reverse in roles, Max would have. I think Max would have done the exact same thing. Like, let's say he's not even in the championship. Like, we've seen him do moves that were like, oh, doggy.
Oh, so, yeah, right?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I would have done it. Anyone would have done. Any professional racing driver would have done what George did. It's just good hard racing.
Well, let me throw this at you. George hasn't had the greatest car compared to Max the last season and a bit. If these two guys had similar machinery underneath them, this would be something we would be seeing a lot more. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great point. It was funny listening to. Christian Horner about all this towards the end, you know, because it was something that Max had made mention that, you know, if he's going to remember, I'm paraphrasing, he's going to remember this for next time sort of thing, and Christian Horner sort of playing into it, saying that Verstappen was like an elephant, he doesn't forget. That's pretty good. What did you think of the race? What did you think of the weekend format? Personally, like, I liked everything up until the sprint race. I found everything pretty entertaining. Like, I was entertained Friday and then half of Saturday, and then the race kind of
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that they've maybe kind of found the evolution or the combination of formats that works for a sprint weekend, where you have your qualifying on Friday, then you have your sprint shootout qualifying on, and then you have the sprint race itself. I mean, kind of treated in its own separate entity from the Grand Prix itself. Have your qualifying as usual, that works. The shortened sprint shootout qualifying, sprint race, Grand Prix on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, the Grand Prix itself, I mean, Baku has been so chaotic ever since we went there in, 2016 for the European Grand Prix or whatever they called it then.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a lot of drama there over the years. So this year, a bit of a tamer race compared to historic norms. But just sort of generally speaking, I kind of like the flow of the weekend. These sprint weekends can be a bit of a grind just with all the extra action on the track, but treat the sprint separately, and they finally decided to do that. And yeah, I think it works. You know, I'm kind of encouraged to see. I think we got, like, what was it, one more, or do we have two before the summer break? I know they're kind of backloaded towards the end of the season. We know that it worked phenomenally well last year in Brazil. I mean, that track, Interlagos, just seemed to really work well for the sprint race. So maybe the best is yet to come, because I think we're going to see it at Coda and Austin and a couple other places, Austria as well. I forget them all because I think there's, six
there are
total.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's 6 of them for the entire season. Next up, oh boy, when's the next one coming up? I think the next one will be in Imola, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I think you're right, yeah.
And then I also, is there one in Austria as well?
Yep, at the Red Bull Ring. That's correct.
Yeah.
And then there's Coda, and then Brazil, and then there's one other one in there that I can't recall right off the top of my head. So
it's what would you like to see them do differently? Like, what, like, in your, like if because they're experimenting here, right? Like F1 is trying to essentially make every day count so that the fan who pays for a ticket to come to the race, that, you know, every day matters and they should probably be there to take advantage of it. I like that they're trying to do stuff. I really do. Do I think it needs a bit of a shakeup? I mean, yes and no. I don't necessarily think you need to reinvent the wheel or go about this in terms of, you know, reinventing everything for an entire season. I kind of like that they've decided to go to 6 sprint races. It kind of switches things up, which is great, and I like that. What would you like to see them do?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because, I mean, for years we kind of like, I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, we had like a maximum of 16 races per year. So sometimes, you know, I sometimes struggle to get around these longer seasons, and, you know, the talk of going up to 30. I mean, if they can maximize that, I think for me it's just getting like that good mix of like the classic tracks and some of the exciting new ones, and, you know, trying out going to newer places and just getting that sort of like global representation. You know, I was really stoked when they came up with like the sprint qualifying or the sprint race idea a couple of years ago, but I don't think it's, you know, it's I'm too far off the mark in saying that it's fallen short so far. But this weekend, despite the fact that the race itself on Sunday wasn't too super exciting, I like the format that it was in general, because there was you know, plenty of exciting things going on. I mean, qualifying was pretty dramatic at times, as was the sprint race itself at times. But I mean, that's the thing of just trying to find something like a format that really works, and this is good. I mean, that's the whole thing is finding like those magic mix of ingredients to really get everybody excited and stoked, and make Formula One, be it, you know, at the track or at home, that this is appointment viewing, that I got to get down, I got to get in front of my screen and watch this. Or if, like you say, if you're at the track, you got that weekend pass, you're showing up for every single session on every single day that you're there.
Yeah, I would like. I was talking to a driver about this before the start of the weekend, and, you know, they had a good idea where it was, well, why not just move, you know, everything? So why not get rid of Friday? So at the moment, what we normally do when we do go to a Grand Prix, so we fly in on a Wednesday. Our Thursday is usually our sit-down one-on-one interviews with the drivers. And that's where we kind of collect a lot of our content that we're going to use a little bit later on in the season, or it's things that we're going to talk about for SportsCenter. And then Friday, we've got our practice sessions, and then Saturday you've also got your practice and your qualifying, and Sunday your race. What this driver was saying is, well, why don't you just get rid of the Friday and do your media day on your Friday and do your practice qualifying on Saturday, and then just do your race on Sunday, and do something like that, where if you're going to do sprints as well, then why don't you just do the qualifying and the sprints on the Saturday, and then use that sprint race to set the grid for the Sunday.
Yeah, then basically you've got Formula One action over the course of 2 days, rather than having to fill up the card with other support series races and things like that. So I don't know, that's a great question, right? It's like how much are people showing up for Formula One? How much are going there because they enjoyed the other series as well? You know, that's a great question, right? I mean, when you get like the F2 support races or whatever it is, I mean, that is the talent of tomorrow. So I guess there's a lot of arguments, you know, for and against, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not at that pay grade, so nobody's asking me those. Nobody's asking me those questions in any serious context. Not that you weren't, but
let's jump into the Grand Prix.
Sure.
You know, not the greatest, you know, of races that, you know, we've seen. Had its moments. I don't know. Let's just jump right into the Verstappen Perez thing, because most of the people who are listening or watching this, or they've already seen the race or whatever. They don't need us to recap it. Like, I mean, you just watch highlights real quickly. So Verstappen and Perez, I think in that opening stint, for Max. You know, he did start to really struggle with that rear tire degradation. I mean, he did say post press conference that we were on, like, you know, I wasn't really struggling with it that much, but like on the radio, man, you could hear it, you could see it in the lap time. I think he's not telling everything, but yeah, it was just interesting to see how well Sergio was able to maintain the tire deg this weekend as well. Like he was good. Like obviously he's great in the sprint race, but again, like he was good in this Grand Prix, and also on top of all of that, I mean, if he didn't get kind of lucky with that safety car, I still think he wins this.
I would agree with that. I mean, this is a track that Checo just goes good on. I mean, it suits him very, very well, and I think that regardless if Max was maybe struggling with a bit of tire deg on those rear tires, I think that Sergio had the measure of him today. I think that he's been there now. He's been there every time they've raced there. He's got like 2 wins and a podium now, like three out of 6 races, I guess. Well, he's at least, but I mean, he's run well every single time. This is a track that was made for Sergio Perez, and he just looks strong all weekend.
I like that, Christian Horner predicting before the race that whenever a car goes off, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was like whenever a car goes off at this track, they bring out the safety car. And, Nick DeVries goes off. And they bring out some yellow flags. And so Red Bull decides to pit Max. And then all of a sudden you get a safety car that really benefits Checo. I honestly, I was surprised to hear him say that and then have them pit Max when they did. I mean, that car of De Vries's was clearly damaged, and there was no way in hell he was backing that thing onto the track, man. That thing was so broken. I mean, there was no steering, like he couldn't even steer. So where was he going to go? Where was he going to reverse to? And I don't know. I just don't think it's fair to just simply, say that, he should have just backed out onto the track. I mean, it's a blind, like coming in, it's almost blind, right? Like,
I mean, like as soon as he hit that, the Tech Pro barrier there, you could see like that left front tire. It's towed out at like a 45-degree angle, because like when I saw him initially parked there, I'm like, oh yeah, Nick just put it in R and get the heck out of there. And then I took a bit of a closer look. I'm like, oh wait, that left front tire, that front wheel doesn't look too good. And I mean, I think we've had a safety car at least one every single year since this race has gone to Baku, and sometimes there's been many of them. So it was just an inevitability that was going to happen. But the interesting part about it was that a lot of guys hit that that barrier there at that same turn, but Nick just took more of it, and he paid the price because Lance did it. Who else did it? There was at least 4 or 5
throughout the weekend for sure.
Throughout the weekend, yeah. I think he collected more of it, and it really just it was funny because I just thought, like, what did he do there? And then we see like the different replays. It's like, oh yeah, he collected that pretty good. Lance's
was lucky. Like I think he got away with one there. He really dinged it, man. And at the end of the day, like, I don't know, that Aston Martin's almost built like a tank. Like, do you remember when the two of them, like when Lance had a bit of contact with Fernando in Bahrain at the opening lap, like no damage to the car whatsoever. And then here again, like he took a big piece of that wall. That thing didn't even bend or break. I mean that Aston Martin's built tough. But at the end of the day, I really enjoyed the battle between Sergio and Max. Both drivers, trading fastest laps. Both drivers within tenths of a second of each other with lap time. Like Sergio doing such a great job of opening the gap, maintaining the gap to make sure Max didn't get within the DRS range. And I think one of the things that maybe the casual viewer might not know or see is the fact that these two drivers, I mean, they really pushed each other on Sunday, Dailey. I know the race wasn't super exciting, but like from myself, from a former driver's perspective, like those two, they went back and forth on lap time. They were banging the walls. They were rubbing the walls. They were on the limit, man. Like it was good racing between those two just for Sergio to keep that gap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a couple of times they're going to turn 15, watching Sergio kind of like drift out and getting pretty close. That's the same one that Logan hit in the sprint race on Saturday, and messed up his car pretty bad. But I mean, Max as well. He was all over the place, like really pushing it to the limit as well. I mean, it was fun to watch. I mean, it might not have been as obvious as some of like these big spectacular overtakes or like George versus Max during the sprint race, but just watching these two guys trying to, Sergio stay out front of Max and Max trying to catch his teammate. Because what was it, maybe about 5 or 6 laps from the end, I think race commentary kind of made the comment, okay, Max has dropped back to about 3.5 seconds. It looks like he's conceded this one. He's going to let us give his teammate the victory today, and maybe Max just realized that things were just he didn't have the tires that were underneath him, and he just didn't quite have enough of an edge to push that he wanted to challenge his teammate.
Yeah, and Max just didn't really, I don't know, in some of the press conferences, like, it just didn't really seem like he was all there this weekend in terms of, like his normal self, where he's usually very engaged and hearing what you were saying and things like that. He just, I don't know. And then some of his comments about, the sprints and, wanting to just do away with them, like he wants to go back to the old ways of Formula One. He doesn't want to lose that DNA, and what he had some comments also as well coming into the weekend, about how long his career was going to be and how long was he going to be in Formula One and all those kinds of things. And I just found it quite interesting, like his overall sort of just what it looked like from the outside perspective. He just didn't seem like he was right there this weekend like he normally is, and I'll be curious to see what goes down in Miami and how that shakes out. We can touch on that in a bit, but
sure.
Horner saying at the end of the race that I believe it was, quote, unfortunate that of the timing of the safety car when it came out. I mean, I don't know if it's the right choice of words, man. Like one of your guys you finished 1-2, and one of your guys just like won the race, and I don't see that as so unfortunate. And at the end of the day, I still think that Sergio was going to catch Max regardless, but it's
Christian's unbiased or unconscious bias towards Max slipping out there.
Yeah, maybe. It's like a 6-point gap between the two of them in the championship, with Max obviously having the lead. And like, let's just call this what it is. Like if Sergio doesn't have a poor weekend in Australia, the chances of him actually being tied or leading this championship at this moment, they're very good.
Yeah, and that kind of like leads the question, right? Like how long is this allowed to be? And I'm going to use the air quotes, the inverted commas here, like a title fight between them before before Yoss starts like getting involved, and team like Max's management and Max himself saying like, come on, this shouldn't be happening. This is my team. I'm the reigning world champion. Like what are you doing with this guy? It's like, when does like team orders become like a thing, like either spoken or unspoken, that it just like Sergio just knows that this is Max's team. He's our undisputed number one. He's going to get the benefit of like everything here on out, right?
And I think that it's so important for Sergio to maintain this level of consistency. Like at the moment they're 2 for 2, right? Like if we're looking at Grand Prix, not including the sprint, like they're 2 for 2. So Max has won 2 Grand Prix, Sergio's won 2 Grand Prix, and last year, Sergio was pretty handy up until after Monaco, I would say, when the car started to kind of get developed away from him, and they started to get it lighter, and it was a little more nimble for Max. It kind of suited Max's driving style a little bit more. And then when you look at this season, I mean, that car essentially is also tuned and built in and around for Verstappen. But I think Sergio has done like a really great job of turning that driving style around. And, for myself watching that, it's a really hard thing to do for a driver, like really adapting that driving style and changing kind of what you're naturally wanting to do. So it's very tough to do that, but it's been impressive to see him evolve and really do that, considering like even what his age is, right? Like like the older you get, the harder that skill sort of becomes to develop daily. It's really difficult.
Well, just let's put it this way. He's been able to do with this car what guys like Danny Ricciardo, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, they weren't able to do, right? They were not able to wrestle this Red Bull, or not this one, but previous ones, that a car was designed for Max. And Sergio, although he had like his bumps along the way in the first season there, I mean, he's done an exceptional job becoming one with that car and really adapting and extracting the maximum out of it. I don't think we can give that guy like enough like praise and kudos for the work that he's done there.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like I said, it's the weekends like Australia. He's got to avoid that. Like, just like has to avoid that. Needs to stay consistent, because trying to go up against, Verstappen, that's going to be very difficult for him to do it. But I think after watching today, I am confident to say that I think he can push him for the championship. I'm not saying that Sergio can win the championship, but I think he can push. I think he can push Max for that championship. And I guess, if you're a viewer or a fan of Formula One, I mean, it's been okay to start off, but we need that.
So what you're saying is that when like Checo versus Max is more like a Nico Rosberg versus Lewis rather than a Valtteri Bottas versus Lewis.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah. It'd be spicy, wouldn't it?
It would be good. I'd like it, Dailey. It'd be good. Yeah. Let's talk about your boys, Ferrari. So, have some upgrades coming in the pipeline over the next few races, but nothing really, aside from regular downforce packages that they do bring for Azerbaijan with the rear wing and etc. But nothing really too serious with this car for this weekend. But I still don't think they know where they are in terms of their lap delta to Red Bull. I still don't think they have a good grasp of where that is just yet. Like, their straight line speed's impressive. Their one lap pace is really good. Their race pace is horrible. And tire management, tire deg in the race is not good at all. Struggling mightily with that race pace. So it was interesting to watch, Leclerc. He's been very handy in Azerbaijan. He's been very good there. I just think that this could have been, if they were able to figure out the race pace a little bit more, this could have been a higher finish for him. I mean, obviously getting Ferrari's first podium of the season and all.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is P3 like a P1 for Charles this weekend? And like you say, I mean, like very much like Sergio, this is a track that Charles has done pretty good at over the years as well. And I think that, he did what he needed to do on Sunday. I mean, he was able to extract that top end speed out of the Ferrari just to keep Fernando at arm's length. At times he got kind of sort of close enough, but not really close enough to really get within DRS range and really make like a real solid challenge. But I mean, still, P4 for Fernando is nothing to be disappointed about. But then Carlos, I mean, he kind of wasn't really anywhere. I mean, all he could really do was just get enough out of that Ferrari just to kind of keep Lewis just like far enough that that when he did kind of gain an advantage, especially using like the DRS and those two DRS zones, that he was still 4, 5, 6 car lengths behind. That, all he could really do was maybe hope that that Carlos maybe have a bit of a mistake and get it kind of sideways going in or coming out of a corner or something like that. And Carlos didn't. I mean, he drove a pretty consistent race. It was kind of bland. I think he just kind of basically managed and kept his nose clean and just did enough to keep himself in front of Lewis, who clearly was at a disadvantage. So, I guess it's the results. A double top 5 finish for Ferrari, where they've struggled at times, is good, but I mean, it wasn't really wow, that was an amazing finish for the Scuderia today. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's see what happens next weekend in Miami, right?
I think it's going to be tough for them in Miami. I just think the heat and the humidity and the way that the tire degs for them, but Miami did lay down some new surface for this race coming up next weekend. So I'm not too sure how well that's going to play into all of this for Ferrari. I mean, depending on how much heat, the pavement's going to soak up at the same time, right? Like if you look at the pavement in Saudi Arabia and what they use there, it actually does a great job of absorbing that heat, and it actually is a very kind pavement to the tires. Miami last year, it was not.
Oh, it tore those tires to shreds last year. It's crazy.
It was bad. So for this season, having repaved it, I'll be interesting to see what that's like when I get there. But I don't know. I think it's going to be tough for them in Miami, Dailey. I think it's going to be tough for them until Imola, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I see them in front of the Astons and the Mercedes this weekend, well, I mean, so I guess they've kind of been closer to the Mercedes so far this year than the Astons. I think that those long straightaways in Baku really played to their advantage. I think that when you get to some of these shorter tracks that aren't don't have these long straightaways, that where they can really open it up, there's going to be a disadvantage for them until they can figure things out. And I think unless something that they're able to uncork some unseen potential out of this car. This is really just like the development on last year's car. I mean, Fred Vasseur just inherited what was there when he got there in the middle of the off season around New Year's. So we're not really going to see his influence in the design of a car until next year. So this is, I think it's a kind of see what you get year, and maybe they get lucky here and there, but I think for the most part, kind of what we've seen through the first 4 races of the year is what we're going to see all season long from them.
Let's talk about the pit lane incident with.
Oh man, crazy!
Yeah, with Esteban Ocon, because that had potential to really be a disaster. So last lap of the race, photographers, media personnel, they are allowed to be in pit lane on the last lap of a Grand Prix. Where the ceremony is usually is going to be held and taking place, and usually there's crew there from the circuit to kind of set up where the barricades are that the cars are going to have to stop, and drivers are going to get out of the cars, etc. Where they were, and I guess where photographers, media personnel, and personnel in general are moving to is what I think needs to sort of be policed or managed or controlled in some form or fashion. Hearing from the FIA, I heard from them following the race when the stewards summoned the FIA representatives who are in charge of all of that down there during the post race, and then getting a text from them following that saying that this is going to be something that's they're going to have to look into and come up with a solution for the next event. They got away with one today, Dailey.
Oh man, did they ever? I mean, I was watching the Sky Sports feed for this one, and Crofty is talking to Ted Kravitz, who's in the pits, and they're talking about the fact that Hulkenberg had just pitted a couple of laps from the end for his one and only pit stop from the race, and they're talking about Esteban, who had also done 50 laps on a set of hard tires. And they're kind of speculating on the fact it was like, Alpine couldn't have forgotten to pit him. They know, and I mean, Otmar is a smart enough, wily enough character that you knew that he must have been thinking something like this to get his guy in and out of the pits on the very last lap of the race. But you hear Kravitz talk about the fact that they're starting to throw up a barrier at the close-off pit lane. And, I hate to, and it's a bad comparison to say it was like watching a car wreck in slow motion, because they're talking about this thing like unfolding in real time, and they go to that elevated camera at the end of pit lane, so you're looking from the pit lane from the opposite end from where the exit is, like all the way up, and you can see Esteban in there. There's this huge crowd of people there with like the official like FAA vests on for the different photographers and whatnot, and you literally see these people all jumping out of the way, and Esteban like laying on the brakes. I'm just like, who's the one that did not realize that out of 20 cars or 17 cars or however many that were left at the time, that there was one car that still had to make the pit stop, because they all have to have one mandatory pit stop during the race, and they have to use at least two different compounds of tires, that somebody let that slip and was kind of like looking instead, okay, this is what these people are allowed to do. This is where that they're allowed to be, and it's more like they went by the book rather than what was happening out on the track, albeit extremely unorthodox. I mean, how often do we see a car come in on the last lap of the race for their first pit stop of the race? I certainly can't think of another example right off the top of my head. But it was just ridiculous. I mean, to see, there was probably easy 30, 40 people standing right up at that entrance to pit lane there. It was crazy.
Yeah, I'll give you my viewpoints on this from the two ways that I can kind of, see it. Obviously being a former driver, that's its perspective, but then working in the media, covering Formula One full time is now a different perspective for me. So, when these Grand Prix are starting to come to a close or wind down, and you're not in the media center, you're usually, you're out in the paddock or you're in and around pit lane, and you're scrambling to get everything set up and ready to interview the drivers, interview the team personnel, cover whatever story you need to cover in that moment. And all you can really see are TV screens. You can see the race that's going on, but you don't get the finer details or the sound of like what's happening, because it's as one person, it's really hard to cover 20 drivers, 10 teams, and an entire Grand Prix on your own. Nobody can do it. Like it takes a big team. And so I can understand, getting lost in those details. I can see that.
It is easy to happen. I'll give you like an example from my own like career in sports media. But this is a little bit different because there's a whole bunch of people. I mean, you can go to like these big major league events, and they're so very well choreographed, and everybody knows where everyone is supposed to be. But sometimes it's easy to get to be, beyond the wrong barrier. A number of years ago, I was covering the Rugby Sevens here in Vancouver, and one of the things that our media passes allowed us to do was we were allowed to have like touchline access, so we could sit up in the press box. We could go down to around the edge of the field at BC Place, right with all the photographers and everything, see the action right up close. I can't remember which match it was going to be. It was like Fiji versus the All Blacks or something like that. So I was walking down there with one of my colleagues, and we took what we thought was going to be the right turn. We ended up taking the wrong turn. We walked out the wrong entrance, and lo and behold, we're greeted by 50,000 screaming fans thinking that we were the All Blacks, whereas we're just a couple of numbskulls. with the media passes. But it's a little bit different, though. That was our own mistake. This wasn't like that, you've got a collection, a group of people that are there to start taking pictures and doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're kind of marshaling where they're supposed to be, and they're all of a sudden, okay, go and do what you need to do, at the same time that a guy that's just doing 200 miles an hour comes screaming into the pit lane to change his tires to try and get the best result. I mean, his race is still not over. I mean, his race is still a couple minutes left before he comes back and shuts that thing off. So it's just nuts.
Yeah, from
nuts.
a driver's perspective, your mentality is racing, right? You're pushing, and like you said, you're trying to get the best results possible for you and the team. And that includes maximizing every moment of the race, including coming into pit lane. And you're hauling ass into pit lane, man.
Sure, yeah.
And you need a braking reference. Like, you need that to slow the car down so you don't go blowing past the pit lane speed limit line. Because if you do that, you know that you're going to get a penalty, right? So having that reference there is crucial. And for Esteban Ocon, like, if, and he mentioned this post-race, like, you blow that braking reference, and this is a different outcome. And it's good heads-up driving from Esteban, for sure, to notice all that, to have the vision to see far enough ahead to make that reaction necessary. And think about the driver and how dialed in they are, like, when they're coming down pit lane. Like, they're doing 300 kph, man.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get down to, like, whatever it is, 80 or 60 or whatever.
80, yeah.
And think about that's like warp speed to no speed in an instant, and you've got, like, a crew of people, like a wall in front of you, and you need to make the right choice, like, to react. And
instantaneously.
Good for him. Good heads up driving. You had mentioned that you don't remember the last driver to do something like that. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think it was Alex Albon in Australia in 2022.
Yeah, it's not something that we see guys, like, quite often going to change, like, tires right at the end of the race to try and get, like, a fastest lap. But I mean, somebody going in for, like, their first, like, pit stop of the race is very unorthodox. And that race, Alex, I mean, that was that amazing race. Didn't he get what did he get, a P9 or a P10?
Yeah, I think he got P10. I think he got P10 in that one. He scored points for the team.
Which was amazing, because that was just brilliant tire management with with that Williams obviously wasn't a great car last year. Slightly improved this year, but
bad.
I mean, it happens, but it's not very often. And I just can't imagine what was going through Esteban's head when he pulled into pit lane there. I mean, I guess as a driver, you're going to expect to see any number of things that could happen out on the track, right? But of all the different variables, that Rubik's Cubes of things that you expect to see where you're strapped into the car, like a giant gaggle of people with cameras standing at the entrance to pit lane, probably isn't in your top 100 of things that I expect to see when I'm in the car today.
Just a horrible weekend for Alpine in general. Like, it was.
Oh man, don't remind me. I got them in my fantasy team. It's just like I had hopes, man. I had hopes.
Dude, it was bad. That was bad. I feel bad for the team. They brought upgrades, and I don't really think they got a chance to get a good understanding of what they actually have. Obviously with Gasly had his issues, Ocon had his issues on Friday, and Ocon starting from pit lane on Sunday, it just brutal. Pierre Gasly coming home 14th, Ocon coming home 15th, and you know what? It just hasn't been a great start to this season for them. I mean, both of them took each other out in Australia. It hasn't been what I think they wanted it to be, like, to get off the start.
Well, it has to be like a real low point for them 4 races into the season, because not only do you have like that sorry laundry list of, wall of shame incidents that they've gone through so far this year, but on top of that, to compound it, maybe this is a wake-up moment for the team where they sit down and say, okay, we have to do better, because despite all the stuff that's happened, I mean, at least they've been able to score some points, and somehow they were still hanging on in the top 5 in the constructors. But this weekend, that is no more. McLaren has now taken that 5th and final spot over in the constructors. I mean, they're still a country mile behind Ferrari, but still, you could say at least, hey, we're top 5 constructors, even though you're only in front of Haas and Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, and Williams. But still, I mean, bragging rights are bragging rights, and that was
100%.
It was just bad, man. It was just bad.
Aston Martin, man, Alonso obviously was on a roll of 3 straight podiums, and then coming into this weekend for the team, having all those DRS issues that they had,
Yes.
and
Yep.
Friday and Saturday, the DRS, from what the team told me, working from the DRS activation and zone from turns 2 to 3, but the DRS not working on these start-finish straights, where that is a huge benefit. You're talking 2-3 tenths in and around there, and to not have that weapon during
Well, look
qualifying
how good it worked
stuff.
for Red Bull, right?
Oh man! Well,
That
Red Bull's
DRS down.
their DRS is like another planet, but
Yeah, no, I mean the
Same
example
point,
was
like-
when the DRS is working down that start-finish straight.
Yeah.
I mean, what a tool, what a weapon that is,
yeah,
man.
100%, man. And I think for Aston Martin, I think they overachieved this weekend. To be honest with you, I don't. That both Lance and Fernando's car just not suited for this track in Azerbaijan. There's just too much straight line speed, and the thing with the Aston Martin currently is it does have a lot of drag, and it does go a little slower in a straight line, and then you add on top of that the DRS isn't working. It was funny, listening to Alonso's post-race press conference stuff. He said that Charles Leclerc had gotten lucky with third in the race on Sunday, simply because the Aston Martins, they were so strong in the race, which was surprising to myself, but it was also surprising to the team.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes, you're not just good, you're also lucky. I think this is one that they probably go back to Silverstone or go to Miami next week and say, guys, I think we didn't really deserve that many points. I mean, look at that one mistake that Lance had where he got overtaken by Lewis, and after that he just kind of faded. Still, he managed to bring home points. It was a top 10 finish for him. And then, P4 for Fernando. Sure, that breaks his run of podiums to start the season. But, I mean, they're all points at the end of the season. You're not really going to care. You take them how you get them is the point, no pun intended, I'm trying to get across. But was I the only person whose brain started to melt when Fernando got on the horn halfway through the race and said, tell Lance to use the same brake balance setup that I'm using? Because I'm sure that there's any number of former Fernando teammates that are probably said after, he said what during the race? I'd love to see Lewis's a reaction to that, man. That was just crazy.
Dude,
wow,
it was funny what he said post race. I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he had said that he gave advice like that to teammates in the past. It's just that only this time Formula One was being nice to him by broadcasting it.
Maybe they were, but I was just maybe that's the thing. Stuff like that for nice Fernando's never seen the light of day before. But I thought that was a bit of an interesting thing, because I went back and just listened to that a couple of times. It just and the thing was, he sounded happy about it. It wasn't like they were pulling that information out of him. It's just he gave it of his own free will. I'm like, that's pretty cool, man.
Well, on the I think it was Thursday evening. I think it was it was Lance, Lawrence, and Flavio Briatore and Fernando. I think they all went out for dinner together. And I think, like, honestly, like, this is just at the moment, obviously, you know, these two really like each other and they work really well together. I would say, from my perspective, I would say that I think both of them work extremely well together. Think like older brother, younger brother, so to speak.
Plus the fact that I think like Lance is a pretty chill dude. Like, that's not to say that I don't think he's serious about his job. Like I think that, I don't know. I think it's just his mentality. I think he's a very down to earth kind of guy. Like I see Lance and I see some of these other drivers and like they seem so corporate, you know, and like Lance, just to me, he seems like a normal guy. Like I could see and like, you know, be talking to like in the coffee shop or at at work or what. I mean, he just seems like such a normal person compared to the rest of them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Fernando's known him for so long, and they've gotten along for so long. I mean, Fernando has known Lance since he was like, you know, just a little kid in karts, dude. Like, he's known awesome. Lance for a long time, because Lance was a part of the Ferrari Academy group when Lance was super young, like 10, 11, 12 years old. And Fernando would see him around sometimes at the factory when Fernando used to race for Ferrari. And, you know, I think like Schumacher is probably one of those drivers that, you know, Lance looks up to, and same goes with, you know, Lewis in some cases. And I think for Fernando, I think he's probably one of them as well. And I think to have him as your teammate, that's huge, man. And factor in that you guys get along. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's great for Aston.
That's pretty cool.
That's great for Aston Martin.
Yeah.
I think Stroll may have pushed a little bit too hard on that hard tire stint in the opening frame of it. I know that there were some tweets going on that it may have been the message that Fernando had relayed about the brake balance and trying something different, and then, you know, I think people thought that, oh, he tried it and then he went off and Lewis overtook him. I think actually he might have had a little too much heat generated in that hard tire, because turn 16 was giving him a hard time the entire race. Like, he was getting a ton of understeer at entry, exit, and then sometimes it would turn into like a snap oversteer. It was really strange. But for him, I don't necessarily think that he was going to catch Carlos. I think like he was either going to finish where he was or just in front of Lewis.
Yeah. I agree. It was just that's the way, like the writing on the wall just seemed to be that way for such a long time. I wasn't really too surprised. That's the way it played out at the end. Yeah,
and I think they just overachieved with the race for both. I think both Lance and Fernando did today, just overachieved with that car. The Russell and Stroll pit lane incident was interesting. I mean, that's smart, man. From like, I didn't even know that rule. Like, that's smart from George. Like, he must know that rule book inside out, dude, because to have that awareness, to know that you can do that coming down pit lane, that's crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah. That was fantastic. I mean, and that's what sets real champions apart. I mean, obviously George is not a champion yet, but I mean,
he's a champion in everything else he's pretty much driven in. Like,
well, yeah, but you know, the thing is knowing all these things that you can use to your advantage, and then just like use it, like pulling that out of like your tool bag, like on a split second like that. Because I was looking at that, I'm like, surely there's going to be something about that. And I mean, it was interesting too, because like they did say, like, it was noted, race control said it was noted, and then like pretty much as soon as that came up, like on the race feed, as soon as that disappeared from the race feed, you know, the steward said, nothing to see here, no investigation necessary. What George did was 100% legal. Yep. There was nothing wrong there. So I mean, that was pretty impressive that he knew how to do that, and on the fly like that. That's pretty cool.
McLaren, let's finish up on them. McLaren, so they brought their first phase of upgrades to this car. There are going to be 3 fairly big phases. This one was a new floor and a new inlet to the tunnel. And yeah, I mean, there were points where I looked at it like, this thing may just be working here for them. I understand that the team weren't expecting a huge step forward with the new floor, and I don't really think they're going to know, exactly if this floor has worked like it's supposed to until they get a bit later into the season. I appreciate the fact, though, that Lando Norris is pretty straight up about it, because he said following the race that he doesn't feel any difference, between what they had previously to now. He said just that, the oversteer is just a tiny bit less is one of the things that he had said. So I respect that truthfulness, Dailey.
Yeah, and it's like anything else. I mean, when, they had, like, Zach was pretty upfront before the start of the year that they weren't anywhere close to where they wanted to be, and it was going to take a while before they got the upgrades on the car, and to be patient to see, with the results that they were going to get. But, I mean, still, Lando comes home P9, and after the first couple of races, I was just like, especially on a track like Baku, are we really going to see like a big improvement? But still, Lando comes home in P9. His teammate Oscar comes home in P11, just outside of the points. You got Yuki right in the middle there, taking the last point, out of the championship there in P10. But still, Oscar wasn't that far behind. He was only about 6.5 seconds behind his teammate, about 2.5 behind Yuki. So if things worked out a little bit different, maybe both those cars come home in the top 10. So like yourself, I appreciate the honesty from Lando, but maybe he's being overly cautious. But like you say, it's going to take them a couple of races, most likely, to really figure out what they've got now that they've put these new upgrades onto the car, and if it's going to do what they're expecting it to. But I think that you got to be a little bit positive. There's got to be a silver lining here compared to the first couple of races of the season. I don't think this is like completely horrible for McLaren. Like I say, they moved up to P5 in the constructors, which is a moral victory if nothing else.
You got time for some Twitter questions?
Sure, man. Let's go.
From at Scorchin87, what are your thoughts on the George Russell and Max Verstappen incident during the sprint on Saturday? I know we touched on it off of the top there, Dailey, but I think personally, I really liked it. I like that we got a bit of beef, man. I'm here for it, and if there's, just keep it coming. Back that Brinks truck of emotion up, baby. Just unload it.
Yeah. I love good hard racing as long as it's it's fair. There's nothing dangerous. If these guys trade a little paint, so be it. We love the excitement, and I don't see anything offside about that. I think it was great. It was exciting, and we did see some great overtakes as well. The rest of the entire weekend. Lance's move on Alex during the sprint race, that was pretty good. Yeah. Fernando's move on Carlos Sainz, I think it was in the beginning of the race at T6 there. That was a place that we don't usually see too many overtakes. But George and Max, that gets all the headlines, and for all the right reasons. It was great stuff. More of it, please.
Did you get a chance to watch the IndyCar race on Sunday?
I didn't, sadly. That's on my PVR for what I would have watched later, man.
Let me tell you, that was some proper racing in IndyCar today, dude. It was spectacular. One of the questions we have is from at Optimal Ocon.
I wonder who they're cheering for.
They ask, does Marcus Ericsson, so we're going to start with IndyCar on his question, on this person's question, does Marcus Ericsson have what it takes to hold on to the IndyCar Championship lead this time around, even without the help of a double points Indy 500 win? I don't know how much, have you been following IndyCar a lot this year, Dailey?
Just a little bit. I've been really busy at work over the last couple of months. I just want to say in general that I really love the fact that Marcus Ericsson has blossomed in IndyCar.
Yeah.
He was just like, and I don't want to be like overly, mean or cruel to him, but he was kind of there in Formula One to kind of make up the numbers. And I was really pleased to see that when he made the move across the pond over here to North America, that things have worked out the way that they have for him.
Yeah,
I think it's great to see.
I think he's look, I think it's taken him a while to learn and get up to speed. But now that he has, do I think he can hold on and win an IndyCar championship? Yes. This season he seems different. When I talk to him, he seems more confident and sure about himself. Watching him drive, his qualities, commanding races at times, he just has a different sort of, look to him where I can just see that he's confident in what he's doing. And I think in IndyCar, it's all about finishing and getting the points, man. It's like you don't want to get into it. You don't want to crash out of these races because, grabbing points is the only way you're going to win this championship. I mean, you would be lucky if you're an IndyCar driver to win, 2, maybe 3 races in a season. And so you got to finish. And I think what he did on Sunday, he was great. And he did exactly what he needed to do. The weekend just wasn't going in his direction, but he was still able to make it work. I mean, that's Marcus Ericsson learning from Scott Dixon, Dailey, learning from the best. And it's great that, he's got Scott Dixon as a teammate, because that is a very...
Well, who wouldn't want Scott Dixon as a teammate,
yeah,
man?
100%. From @MKUK_3. Why do I feel as if Red Bull is disappointed with Checo's win?
Well, like you so correctly mentioned, Christian's unconscious max bias slipping out there about the safety car. I think that kind of says it all, man. Yeah, it's just kind of well, I guess there's any number of comparisons you could make, but yeah, it's just could you be disappointed about the guy that you don't, maybe it wasn't the one that you wanted to win, but how could you not be happy for Checo, man? Come on.
I hope they let these two race, and I hope, like I said, Sergio can stay consistent, because I'd love to see Checo battle for a championship and win a championship. That'd be awesome. And then think of his fans, his fan following, man, is crazy.
Well, one of my best friends is Mexican.
So good.
And for all the years that we've known each other, we've known each other. We used to do a soccer podcast together. So that's where his passion is. But ever since Checo moved to Red Bull, I mean, he's texting me all race weekend long. It's just
it's awesome.
He's just and he knows that half my my background, my mom's side is Dutch. And he's just man, you better not be cheering for Max. It's you got to cheer for Checo. It's just he's very, very, he's obviously very team Checo. So,
Awesome.
Cool.
I love the passion, man. Love it.
Me too.
From @AustinCon4, do the IndyCar yellow flags need to be reworked? If there's a yellow flag scenario, it shouldn't wait, or I guess he means they shouldn't wait to call it due to pit strategy for certain cars. It's a good question. I actually was thinking about this earlier today, but this is something that they've done for a very long time. This isn't new. So, I mean, teams just have to adjust. Drivers used to complain about the yellow flag and pit opening scenario a lot in the past, but they don't anymore, because you just have to roll with it. Some days it's going to work in your favor. Some days it isn't, and in my opinion, it actually has spiced up IndyCar even more and made it a juggernaut on track. Dailey, I've said this on this podcast before. I think IndyCar is the best racing, the best on-track entertainment in the world. For racing, it's the best racing in the world, I think.
When it just comes to stuff like that, not having the benefit of watching a lot of IndyCar this year, I'm just going to say that when it comes to things like that, the actual management of the race, I just like to see consistency. I mean, a couple of years ago, remember in Formula One,
good point.
You didn't know from race to race how they were going to call track limits, and nothing drives people crazier, either in the car, in the pit lane, or in the grandstands, or at home on the couch watching on TV, is it's just call it, come up with a rule and just call it the same way every single weekend,
Yeah, that's a great point that you make. Consistency, I think, is what us as the fans want to see, but consistency is also what the drivers want to see. So if the stewards are going to call something one way, then you got to make sure you're calling that exact same thing that same way for the rest of the season, man. Mark, this has been good, and really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, so we are the Scuderia F1 podcast. We usually have 2 shows a week, myself and Mark Hamilton. You can find us on Twitter at Scuderia F1 Pod, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you enjoy your podcast. We're there, and we're up for this. We love racing just as much as you. We wish we could do more, but unfortunately, life gets in the way sometimes. But this was fun, man. Always enjoy popping on the pod here and talking Formula One and everything with you.
Yeah, it's great seeing you, dude. It's been a while.
You too, man.
We should do this more often.
It has been.
I'm Tim Haraney, everyone. Thanks very much for listening and watching. Sorry I didn't get to do too much IndyCar in this podcast. It's going to be a busy week coming up. Heading to Miami to cover the Grand Prix. So we're going to have a lot of stuff in Formula One coming out on all the platforms, so it's going to be pretty awesome on that end. I'll get back into the IndyCar swing of things when we come back. But other than that, please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review, as it really helps us grow the show. If you want more from me, you can follow me on social media at Tim Haraney, and we'll talk to y'all later.